Congressman, I want to ask about the tone in this race here in Texas. It changed this week. You've been saying that people are sick of the pettiness and the smallness in politics. Yet during Tuesday's debate that you had with Senator Cruz, you took a page right out of President Trump's playbook, and you called Senator Cruz Lyin Ted. Why did you do that?
Yeah. So there have been untold dollars spent on TV ads that are lies, that are dishonest, trying to scare you about me, trying to incite people based on fear. I went through a whole debate at SMU with Senator Cruz where he made up one story after another. And so at the very outset, when he began with yet another lie, I decided that I could either spend the rest of the debate responding to every single dishonest thing that he said, or I could make sure that everyone understood exactly what he's doing. I said, look, he's dishonest. It's one of the reasons that he got tagged with this nickname, and that nickname resonates because it's true. But I got to tell you, it's not something that I feel totally comfortable with. And perhaps in the heat of the moment, I took a step too far. And,
you regret it?
I don't know that that's the way that I want to be talking in this campaign. But I also heard from so many people, including many here, that as we focus on the future and define ourselves by our ambitions, all those things that I talked about earlier that we should be able to achieve and to lead on, to not answer to these attacks when your opponent says you want to legalize heroin, or that you want to take everyone's guns away, or that you want to open the border, it can invite confusion or questions by people. And so I want to make sure that people know that that's not true, that's dishonest. And then I also want to make sure that there's a contrast offered on everything that we want to do, from immigration to education to healthcare. The choice could not be any more clear.
We're going to get to an audience member in 1 second. Just want to put a button on this because it's interesting that was the answer that you seem to have. You regret, a little bit of regret for doing that. You weren't planning on doing it because Senator Cruz said to you, your pollsters clearly
that's another lie. I don't have a pollster. I don't need.
For your campaign. It was not planned.
I don't poll.
It just came out. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to the issues here. The next question comes from Angie Rogers, who lives in Richardson, Texas. In 2015, her 24-year-old son, Brandon, died of a heroin overdose. Angie.
Howdy. Congressman O'Rourke, the neuroscience shows that the human brain continues to develop into the mid-20s. Marijuana use in the developing brain has been associated with the development of mental health disorders such as addiction, anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, among others. As a mama of a forever 24-year-old son whose substance use began in his teens with alcohol and marijuana and ended tragically with heroin, I have concerns about legalizing substances. How will legalization curb substance use in this emerging adult population?
Thank you for being here and for having the courage to share your story and your son's story. And I know I speak for everyone when we say that we are so sorry for your loss and so grateful that you are here. We lose 70,000 of our fellow Americans to drug overdose deaths. We can continue to treat this as a criminal justice issue, or we can show real caring and compassion and treat it as a public health issue. Make sure that people who have addictions get the care and the help that they need. Here, in the least insured state in the country, we understand some of the consequences of not being there for one another. Maybe it's our chance to take the lead. You asked specifically about marijuana, and I agree with the findings that you cited. As your brain is still forming, to use marijuana in shorthand that I can understand will diminish your chances in life. You won't reach the potential that you would have had you not used it. It's why I want to make sure that we have smart drug control policy. This war on drugs that we've been waging for more than 50 years, 50 years later, more than $1 trillion spent, marijuana is, if not just as, more available than it was at the beginning. It's increasingly being sold in high schools, and as the father of a sixth grader who just entered middle school, that's one of the fastest growing markets, and those kids are absolutely defenseless. I want to make sure that we do the right thing by keeping that drug, that substance, away from kids, away from the vulnerable, the proceeds away from the cartels and kingpins and criminals. I also want to make sure that for those veterans who do not want to be prescribed an opioid, to which they may become addicted, that doctor at the VA who would rather prescribe medicinal cannabis here in this state do not become outlaws for wanting to do so. I want to acknowledge that we have the largest prison population per capita on the face of the planet here in the United States, many serving time for possession of a substance that is perfectly legal or decriminalized or medicinalized in more than half the states in the Union. I think we can do the right thing. Politically, not easy, but we can have that conversation amongst each other and make sure that those who need it to be able to do better, whose doctors believe that that prescription will reduce their pain, ease their suffering, improve their outcomes, are allowed to do that. That we stop trying to incarcerate our way through that problem. And those who have serious addictions to opioids get the treatment and the care and the help that they need. And lastly, those who foisted this epidemic of opioid addiction on this country. Pharmaceutical companies like Purdue, which got off with a slap on the wrist, pay the full consequences, that there is justice and accountability served for those lives that have been lost in this country so far. Until we have that, this problem will not end. And so I'm grateful again that you were here and that you brought this and raised this to everyone's attention today. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Congressman, to follow up, there's a question about legalization of drugs, and I want to read what you said in 2009 at an El Paso City Council meeting. You brought up ending the prohibition on narcotics in the U.S., and you said, quote, "I think we need to have a serious discussion about doing that, and that may, in the end, be the right course of action." How do you explain to a mom like Angie why there should be a serious discussion about legalizing narcotics, which includes heroin?
Yeah. In 2009, when I was on the El Paso City Council, Ciudad Juarez, our sister city, was the deadliest place on the planet, bar none. Why? There was a drug war raging there, in part to satisfy the appetite for illegal drugs in this country, in part due to our prohibitionary, incarceration-first policy that had created such a premium on crossing those drugs that kids were literally willing to die or to kill one another for the privilege of crossing something here into the United States. I thought we owed ourselves, as a country, our sister city of Ciudad Juarez, a conversation on the best way forward. Now, that resolution or that amendment that I offered to the resolution was inartful at best. What I was trying to get to was marijuana, the cornerstone of the drug trade economy. And to clarify the position, and anyone can look this up, Susie Bird, my colleague on the city council, and I wrote an entire book on the subject. And what we focus on is marijuana policy from the perspective of the front lines of the drug war in communities like this one, in communities like El Paso, and talk about an approach that would reduce the problems that we have and improve the outcomes. So to be clear, I don't want to legalize narcotics. I do think we should end the prohibition on marijuana and effectively control and regulate its sale and make sure those who need it for medicinal purposes are able to obtain it through a prescription from their doctor.